Who has not, is that everybody? Is there anybody that hasn't thrown in? I think that's everybody. Okay. First of all, thank you. I don't know how much you know each other. I don't know how much you know each other's stories, but there's pieces of that are easy to share. There's probably some pieces that were hard to share. There's some pieces you're like, I don't want to talk anymore about this. I'll put it on the board, but I wouldn't have put it on the board if I had known I was going to put it on the board at the beginning, right? So I get that. So thank you for taking that step with us. We're not going to push any farther. We're okay. Is it weird that we all said the same kind of stuff? Were there people that said things that you were like, that's me? Like almost, I don't think I heard anything on that board only once. There's this common suite of experiences that really propel us and push us forward. You know what I didn't hear from any of you? A sermon series, a small group that you're a part of, maybe a little bit, maybe. But like, is it weird? I've been a minister of discipleship, whatever that is. I've been doing this I led my first small group more than a quarter century ago. Yes, I am in my 60s. Doing the math. Wait, what? I've been leading small groups since I was in 9th grade. I've been working at churches on and off, like paid to work at churches since I was in my mid-20s. I'm 40 years old right now. Most of the stuff that I have put a ton of my time and energy into is not the stuff that showed up here today. Is that weird? It's a little bit weird, right? Because we think, I don't know, let me just ask, like, who is doing this with the intention of, or maybe you already are, but you're thinking, I'm going to use this class in some sort of a professional ministry situation. Like, I'm going to work at a church. I'm going to do, any professional Christians out there? Anybody who's taking it for your personal, like, I just want to grow in this area. I'm just not really tied to any career stuff. I just want to grow in this. Anybody taking it because it's a required course? No shame in my game, man. So I spend so much time thinking like, oh, why do we get people to do these disciplines differently? Right? How do I get the people in my church to like understand this key theological principle? I don't ever spend a lot of time thinking, how do I make sure that people in my church go through really painful things that'll almost wreck their life, but if they come through it, they'll be in better shape, right? Now, some people have relationships with me and then they get that for free. But generally speaking, it's a little bit weird, right? So we talk about spiritual formation. All of these things tend to be a big deal. Mountaintop experiences, right? The big thing. Got our kids to all go to camp this year, right? Awesome, I'm for it. Relationships. Getting stuck into some sort of a service thing. So for me, I told this story to a couple guys earlier. I was a 9th grade student that was supposed to be an apprentice leader for a bunch of 6th grade boys. And 2 weeks in, the adult that I was supposed to be apprenticing under quit. He's like, screw this, I'm out of here. These kids are nuts, right? So he quit. And so they just left me there with the 6th graders for a year. And I did everything wrong that you can do and still be like out of jail. I messed everything up. Every small group leader thing that you can do wrong, I did. But I have never in my life grown as much as I grew at that time, right? Because there's a new bar and you got to step up to it. Pain, the things that make me trust God the most are the times and the seasons of excruciating pain that my wife and I have been through, right? You haven't felt pain until, I don't know how to describe this to anybody who hasn't gone through it. You haven't felt pain until the people you worship with say they don't want to see you anymore, right? Like the church pain is the worst kind of pain, right? Service, seasons, disciplines, reading, different books, articles, all these things are good. A lot of these things are very difficult to like systematize in a church, right? Like, hey, join this small group if you want to get cancer. Like, that's just not going to happen. You can do mountaintop experiences, like you can plan for those things. And just because it didn't make the list doesn't mean it's not important. Let me just say that, right? Like, what did you eat for dinner on your 13th birthday? You don't know. But the fact is that your parents fed you every night. That was a big deal for your growth and ongoing maturing, right? So I don't know what I had any given meal, but I know that I had the meal. So it's not, don't hear me saying that preaching's not important. Preaching's important. But what's important is the steadiness of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. Seasons, disciplines, all of these things are a big deal. I think, my opinion is that the churches that we lead, or at least that I have been a part of, I'm not, maybe your church isn't, the churches that we lead tend to be really focused on like having good content and good doctrine and good beliefs. Don't always equip people to lead relationally well into the lives of people around them. And I'm convinced that this is this is contributing to the deeply broken place that we find ourselves with the American Christian church. Because the most important thing ends up being, do I have relationships that take me through this? Because as much as I'm a content guy, Look, I got a master's degree, I'm for it, I'm for content. If what we had most needed from God was new content, he could have dropped 10 Commandments 2.0, right? But instead he sent a person. And you were led to Christ and developed by someone who was led to Christ and developed by someone who was led to Christ and developed by someone. If you could trace that, if you had a time machine, you could trace that thing all the way back. At the end of that line is Jesus. Somebody who listened to Jesus, who walked with Jesus, who heard from Jesus, passed that to somebody who passed it 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 to you. Amen. Does that make sense? I'm all for institutions. Since I got to take the tour of Central today, I love all those things. But it is that unbroken chain of relationships of one person investing in the next person that has gotten us at least to where we are today. No matter how, Neil Cole calls it the zombie bride of Christ, like, because it's not, I'm not sure how it's alive, but it doesn't die, right? And so, like, no matter how weak and paltry the church might be sometimes, we are at a point where we made it at least this far. You with me? Okay, so what I want to talk to you about in the time that we have together today, and I was told 4 hours, and then Dr. Roodcup walked out. He said, okay, start at 1:30. I said, that's 3.5 hours. He goes, it'll be fine. So we're just not going to take any break. No, I'm kidding. We're going to take breaks. My plan was 4 1-hour sessions, 45 minutes of content, 10 minutes of open discussion, 5 minutes of break. We're going to compress that a little bit, but we're still going to cover everything we're going to cover today. And then are you all going to be here tomorrow, or some of you?
I think we're all here tomorrow.
Cool. I'm going to try not to cover stuff today, and not to cover today's stuff tomorrow. So it's going to be 2 different things, which I'm a little bit freaked out about, because like today's a lot of foundational stuff, and I think, is tomorrow even going to make sense? We'll find out. All right, I want to tell you about a really terrible thing that happened to me about 8 years ago that shattered my whole plan for how to do ministry. I was at a church, big church. We had about 500 people, and I was the minister of discipleship and evangelism, right? And so I'm at the church, I'm doing the thing, and we had this whole summer of love thing that we like taught personal evangelism, and we taught people, like we focused on inviting, and we got our campus cleaned up, and we were doing service projects in the community, and we talked about outward focus, and we did all these things, right? And leading up towards a big baptism weekend at the end of the summer. Not like we wouldn't baptize people at the moment, but like we're like teaching them to invite, and then we're going to do like a clear gospel presentation, and we're like, this is happening. And we're so excited because it's like moving, right? The church has been kind of stuck, and all of a sudden it's going. And it was fun and it was cool. And we were seeing cool stories. And we said, in 3 weeks, we're going to do a baptism class. And if that sounds like something you're interested in hearing about, you should show up. And I had 30 people signed up for the baptism class, which never in history had we had 30 people signed up for a baptism class ever, right? If 30 people got baptized on a weekend, it would be by far the biggest thing that had ever happened in the history of the church. You get me? You feel where I'm coming from? And got the class ready. And I've taught baptism classes before. I've got good content for baptism classes. I know I'll put the jokes. I'm going to do the thing. I had this idea. I was like, what if, instead of just like coming to a class, what if I paired every single person that got out of the baptistry with like a mentor from one of the spiritually mature people in our church, and they could like walk through it with them, right? They don't have to preach the sermon, just like be there. And so I made a list of all of the people in our church that were like spiritually mature, like ministry leaders, small group leaders, Sunday school teachers, like everybody we had that was like great. And I made the list and I sent them all an email saying, hey, this is what we're going to do and it's going to be awesome and I'd love for you to be a part of it. And nobody responded. So my obvious assumption was like, oh, the email didn't go out properly, right? Like I must suck at email. Can I say suck? Is that all right? Yeah. We can maybe cut that, Tammy. So, okay, cool. That's what we're doing, right? And so, so I called the first person on my list. No brainer. This person is definitely in. And I called them and I said, hey, it's Micah. You probably didn't see my email, but I sent an email. He said, oh yeah, no, I saw it. Oh, okay, cool. He said, I just want to know how honored I was that you would think of me as someone who would be able to do this. It's like, great. So I was like, he said, but I could never do that. I was like, do what? He said, I couldn't mentor a new Christian. I wouldn't know what to say. Look, you loser, I'm not asking you to move to Africa and start a seminary, right? I just want you to like have coffee with some new Christian. I didn't say that. I just like, so, and I was like, oh. He's like, but man, thank you so much. I'm really honored. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited. Love the church. Love what's going on. I'll see you on Sunday. I was like, you loser. Hung up the phone. Called the next person. I said, word for word, I don't think I could ever do that. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, well, I would love to like, I could invite someone to come and sit at a baptism class that you taught. I would think that would be great, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable answering questions. Well, like, what if they ask me questions? My gosh. So I started calling through the list and I made it through 8 before I quit. And it wrecked me because this is the best of the best of the best in my church. And every one of them said, I could never do that. That's your job. I would love to sit and watch you do that, but that's not something I can be a part of. Now, here's the problem. If one person says that, they're the loser. But if everybody says that, then I'm the loser. You with me? Because the machine you are running is perfectly calibrated to give you the results that you are getting. So what I had created was a system where people really liked to come and watch me do stuff. But they didn't do the stuff. They didn't even feel like they needed to do this stuff. And I'm like, how do you not know how to do this? Like, how do you raise your kids? And then I look at their kids and I'm like, no, that actually makes sense. Right? Like, well, what do you do when a friend of yours comes to Christ? And I'm like, oh, well, they don't. That's how it works. And I realized that everything I had tried to do, and I'm like doing small groups and curriculum and Bible studies and doing all this stuff and special classes, none of that stuff was producing in my people someone who could share the gospel for themselves. Someone who could take a new believer under their wing. Someone who could disciple another person. And that put me kind of on a journey of like, this thing ain't working. And I don't want to do things that don't work. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I call that the parable of the baptism class. Here's a quote. I've heard it attributed to 3 different people. I've heard it attributed to Barna. I've heard it attributed to 2 other people I can't remember now. I don't know who said this. But at this point, I think a lot of people have said it. Dallas Willard supposedly said this. I can't find it in print. Somebody said this: every church needs to answer 2 basic questions to justify its existence. The first is, what is our plan for making disciples? And the second is our plan working? What is our plan for making disciples? And is our plan working? What is your plan for making disciples? Is it working? Now I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to tell you something that I have to confess to you. And I don't mean to be pedantic. I can be pedantic. It is one of my character flaws. I'm not, please don't take this as pedanticness. I'm not sure what actually the right conjugation is there. At my church, I have worked very hard to remove the word discipleship from our vocabulary. There's no discipleship at my church. At all, forever, ever. Because no one in my church has any idea what that means. I was a minister of discipleship for years. You know what that meant? I ran the Sunday school and the small groups. Now I'm for Sunday school and I'm for small groups. But I don't know if that's discipleship, right? I know other people that say, well, discipleship, that's like your adult Bible fellowships, right? Or like personal Bible study or your whatever. I don't know what that is. So I am not ever going to say today or tomorrow that discipleship is important, because I don't think it is, because I don't think discipleship's a real thing. I think that there's 2 things that we're calling the same thing. I think that there's spiritual formation and there's disciple making. And those are different things, and I want us to call them different things. Now, I'm just going to tell you, nobody else in the world agrees with me on this. All the big guys who write books, they talk about discipleship and as if, but they always like spend a chapter defining it. So just avoid that. Let me ask you a question. The men's Bible study at your church, they get together and somebody gets up and opens the word and they do a men's Bible study on a Saturday morning and eat pancakes or something. Is that a disciple-making activity? Somebody tell me why it is. This is a disciple-making activity because what? Wrong answers accepted. Go ahead.
Because it's helping these men learn what it means to follow Jesus.
Sure, absolutely.
You can't have a disciple unless they articulate themselves.
Yep. So I'm going to move off this quickly, but for me, I would encourage us to say this is a spiritual formation activity, right? They're being formed spiritually. Spiritual formation activities have value and they're good things to do. I'm not telling you go back to your church and shut down the men's Bible pancake breakfast. But I would say it is not a disciple-making activity unless a person is investing in another person, because that is what we want. So I'm 40 now. When I was 36, I did the math and I realized that 1 week out of every 4 in my life, I had led a mid-sized group for young adults. 1 week out of 4 when I was 36. I had spent 9 years running some sort of a weekly, there's 3 different groups, running some sort of a weekly mid-sized thing, right? And this is what I learned in my time. I can do whatever I wanted. You know what people that were in their 20s, especially the guys, you know what they wanted? Was a guy who was older than them to notice them and invest in them. You know the girls that were in their 20s, you know what they wanted? Was somebody that was a little bit farther, doesn't have to be perfect, someone who was a little bit farther than them to say like, let's get together. And they would walk over broken glass to get that. And they didn't much care about the dodgeball night I put together, but if I could connect them to someone who would actually invest in them, they were all in on that. Does that make sense? I spent so much time writing sermons that no one cared about. And if I had spent a fraction of that time helping people invest in the lives of these 20-somethings, a lot of their outcomes would be different than they are. You hear what I'm saying?
So just to clarify,
Hit me.
Spiritual formation you define as activities that shape our spiritual world.
Yep.
But spiritual or disciple-making activities are investing in the lives of somebody else.
Directly.
Okay.
Yes.
Directly.
So a men's breakfast could be a disciple-making activity. There's ways that you could structure it where that would be the case. Like if you're leading the men's breakfast and you've got 3 guys that you're planning the breakfast with, right? And we're all going to get there Friday night and set up. We're going to pray together. We're going to go over and we're going to take turns teaching. We're going to work there's all kinds of ways. Anything in the world could be a disciple-making activity. I taught a kid to drive this summer during pandemic. 25-year-old kid, never got his license. All right. I taught him to drive. That was my intentional disciple making of this kid. Right. And it worked great. So we're going to talk about it. So what you need to do is start driver's ed at your church.
Yeah.
Right. What you're going to hear me say again and again, like it's not the program. It is a mentality that there is nothing that you could possibly do at your church that you could not be making disciples with. But there's also nothing that you're doing that automatically makes disciples. Does that make sense? All right, what's on this thing? How does one make a disciple? I'm going to cover this some more tomorrow, and I'm trying to shorten. So I'm going to go through this real quick. But let me just tell you, most preachers, if I ask the preacher at your church, you guys yell at me. We'll make this interactive. If I ask the preacher at your church, what are you doing to make disciples? What are the top 3 things that your church does to make disciples? What are they going to tell me?
Small groups.
Small groups. What else?
Sunday morning service.
Sunday morning service.
Sunday school.
Maybe Sunday school. Yep. Okay. I have bad news. I'm going to say this tomorrow. I'm actually going to joke. I'm going to be like, okay, lock the doors. Don't let anybody leave in the next 2 minutes. I guarantee you that if you're the preaching minister, your sermons or your preacher's sermons are not making disciples at all. And here's how I know that. Because they're not a better preacher than Jesus. You know what you call the people that listen to Jesus' sermons? The crowd. They listened to Jesus, but they weren't his disciples. Read the New Testament. Who became a disciple just being like, I just came to everything Jesus did. Anytime the doors were open, I just listened to him. It was great. Every time he was in town, I just go out, sit on the mountainside, listen. Man, that was really good. I'm fed. Did you get fed today? I got fed, right? Next time he's in town, I'll just go out. One time I even went on a trip. We got buses, right? I sat, sang, played the guitar in the bus. We went, we heard him in Jerusalem. It's great. Mountaintop experience. None of those people were disciples. Those people were the crowd. Most senior pastors would say, man, the Sunday morning sermon. And I preach Sunday morning sermons quite a lot, and I get it. When you're in that seat, you feel that way. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a good Sunday morning sermon. It's important for the word to be preached. But I'm telling you, if that's all, now, Jesus' disciples heard all of his sermons, right? And that was important for their development. But if that was all they got, was just the preaching, then they were part of the crowd, and the crowd is who crucified them. We are not good at making disciples. We are good at making crowds. And then we wonder why people wander away from the faith. I thought they were so committed to coming into a boring room on Sunday morning and listening to someone talk. Is that the one? We just lost somebody. I offended. All right. Who's got a Bible? Let me ask you this before. Don't look at your page for a minute. We're going Bible Bowl here. People are making Bible Bowl. All right. Sword drill coming up. All right. If I was to say, what is the Great, don't look at your pages. If I was to say, what is the Great Commission, what would you say? Matthew 20, hold on just a second. Yes, but Matthew 28, what? 19 and 20 is what most people say. And it's, that's 1-8. Somebody's taking perspectives on the world Christian movement. All right. So mostly we go to Matthew 28. What verses? 19 and 20. All right. Read it. You've got a sword drill for us. Read it starting at 19.
Yeah, I'm failing my sword drill right now.
We're all judging you.
So you said 18?
Sure. Start at 18.
And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all
Pause right there.
nations.
You're doing great. I'm not critiquing you. It's great. Good job. Okay. That's what we think of when we think. No, don't leave it. Don't leave it. That's what we think of when we think of the Great Commission, right? Okay. Start again at 16.
Okay. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountains which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him. But some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me.
And we go on from there.
Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.
So here's something that took me my whole life to notice. Did you notice that the Great Commission was not for everyone? Now, don't get me wrong, okay? I think it is for everyone. I think all of us, Great Commission applies to us. He's telling us the same thing he's telling them. But didn't Jesus have like crowds of people following him? Why didn't he tell the crowds to go make disciples?
They were going to mess it up.
Because they didn't know how, right? And even after the crowds, he had like the 120-ish people, right? Why didn't he tell? They're committed. Got him off the cross, gathered in upper rooms. These people are committed. Why didn't he tell them, go make disciples? Because they weren't disciples. The people he gathered to him were the 11, and some of them still doubted. But that's who he commissioned. Here's what I've been wrong about many things. I'm probably wrong about something I'm going to tell you today, but I don't think I'm wrong about this. The people that Jesus commissioned were the people that he had prepared. He did not give the commission to people that were not prepared to take it. Jesus, can we just say Jesus was a smart guy? Like, okay, yes, Son of God, all knowledge. I'm totally in for, the amazing omnis, but like we underestimate sometimes that Jesus as a person was just a really smart dude also, right? Because we just tend to focus on the guy, like, of course he knows everything, but this is a good strategy. He took some people and he invested himself into them until they could do the stuff that he could do. And then he said, go do that, right? Jesus was not focused on disciple making in his 3 years. He was focused on discipler making. That was Jesus's plan. All right, Bill Hull has a book, a great book, called Jesus Christ Disciple Maker. But actually, Jesus' genius was that he was not trying to make disciples. He was trying to make disciplers. Disciplers is what I didn't have at my church because I had been trying to make disciples. I tried to make disciples, I got disciples. What I didn't make was disciplers. And if I can convince you of anything, and let me just tell you, I don't have a book, I don't have resources to sell, I don't do consulting, I got nothing, okay? This is what I'm trying to sell you on. Your job as a Christian leader who is employed at the church is not to run the machine. It is not even to make disciples. It is to make disciple makers. It is to make disciplers. Jesus said, go and make disciples, but he said it to people that he had spent 3 years developing and they knew how to do what he told them to do. You with me? Mm-hmm. Jesus focused on discipler making, and so should we. All right. So here's the format. That's 45 minutes. Do you have questions? Do you have thoughts? Do you want to fight with me about something? I'm very good at taking negative feedback. Hit me. What do you got?